My name is Ethan James, and 3 months ago, if you'd asked me about my life, I'd have told you it was close to perfect. I'm 36, married to Amelia for 10 years, and we have two amazing kids, Maddie, who's 8, and Liam, who's 6. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the biggest drama is whether the Johnson's dog is barking too much. From the outside, we were that family. The ones who hosted barbecues in the summer, volunteered at school events, and spent weekends at the park. Amelia and I met in college. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. Brilliant, creative, and effortlessly beautiful. She was studying graphic design, and I was a shy computer science major. It still amazes me that she even noticed me, let alone agreed to go out with me. From our first date, we just clicked. She had this ability to light up a room, and I had a knack for grounding her when her ideas got too out there. It felt like we balanced each other perfectly. Fast forward a decade, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Amelia had her own small design business, working with local clients and the occasional big name. I worked as a software engineer, pulling long hours at times, but always making sure to be home for dinner and bedtime stories. At least, that's how I saw it. The first signs that something was wrong came gradually, so gradually, in fact, that I almost missed them. Amelia started spending more time on her phone, laughing at texts I couldn't see. She began going out more frequently, claiming she was meeting clients or catching up with friends. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the excuses started to feel thin, like a story she'd told too many times to make it sound convincing. One night, I found myself staring at her from across the dinner table. She was scrolling through her phone while Maddie and Liam chattered about their school day. I don't think she realized I was watching her, but the look on her face caught me off guard. It wasn't the usual distracted smile or absent nod. It was something else, a spark of excitement, maybe, or guilt. "Earth to Mom," Maddie called, giggling. Amelia snapped out of it, putting her phone down with a forced smile. "Sorry, sweetie. What did you say?" "You weren't listening." Maddie teased, but I could tell she was hurt. "I'm listening now," Amelia said, reaching over to tickle her. It worked. Maddie dissolved into laughter, and the moment passed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I tried to bring it up. "You've been really busy lately," I said, keeping my tone light. "Everything okay?" She didn't even look up from her book. "Yeah, just a lot going on with work. You know how it is. Anything I can help with?" She glanced at me then, her smile tight. "No, it's fine. Really. It wasn't fine. I could feel it." A few days later, Amelia told me she was meeting her friend Claire for coffee. Claire and I had always gotten along, so I thought nothing of it. But when she got home, her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly messy, and she smelled faintly of cologne, not her usual perfume. "How was Claire?" I asked casually, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. "Good," she said too quickly. "We had a nice chat." I wanted to press her, to ask why she looked like she'd been out all night, but I didn't. Instead, I watched as she disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with my growing doubts. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the little moments that didn't add up. The phone call she took in the other room, the new clothes she'd bought but never worn around me, the way she'd been pulling away. Was I imagining things? Was I being paranoid? Or was there something she wasn't telling me? I had no idea that those doubts were the first ripples of a tidal wave that was about to crash over my life. The unease gnawed at me for days. I told myself I was overreacting, but no matter how hard I tried to shake it, that whisper of doubt refused to leave. Amelia had always been upfront with me, or so I thought. We'd built our marriage on honesty and communication. Yet suddenly, there was a wall between us, one I couldn't explain or break through. It started with the little things. Amelia was always a creature of habit. She'd been using the same floral perfume since the day we met, a soft, familiar scent that I could recognize instantly. But one evening, she came home smelling completely different, a sharp, musky cologne that didn't belong to me. "New perfume?" I asked, trying to sound casual as we stood in the kitchen, her unpacking groceries while I rinsed dishes. She hesitated for just a second, then shrugged. "No, must be from work. One of my clients probably gave me a hug. You know how people can be." Her explanation seemed plausible enough, but the hesitation stuck with me. I couldn't remember the last time Amelia hesitated about anything. She was always confident, quick with an answer. That moment replayed in my mind over and over, like a splinter I couldn't remove. Then there was her phone. Amelia used to leave it lying around the house, on the coffee table, the kitchen counter, even in the bathroom. But lately, it was glued to her side. She'd keep it face down during dinner and carry it with her everywhere, even into the shower. Once, I saw her glance at a message and immediately tuck the phone into her pocket, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What's that?" I asked, nodding toward her pocket. "Work stuff," she said without missing a beat. "I'll deal with it later." Work stuff. That was her new favorite phrase, the catch-all explanation that left no room for follow-up questions. I hated how easily she said it, how effortlessly she dismissed me with those two words. It felt like a door slamming shut in my face. The tipping point came one Tuesday evening. Amelia had recently started attending a yoga class at a boutique studio downtown. She'd never been into yoga before, but she claimed it was her way of de-stressing. I didn't question it at first. Everyone needs an outlet, right? But that night, she came home an hour later than usual. Class ran long, she said as she walked through the door, her cheeks flushed and her hair damp. "It's just yoga," I said, raising an eyebrow. "How does it run long?" She gave me a tight smile. "Sometimes the instructor stays late to help people with their form. It's not a big deal, Ethan." Her tone was clipped, defensive. I let it go, but my mind was racing. Was I reading too much into this? Or was there something she wasn't telling me? That night, as Amelia slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with unease. I turned my head to look at her, her face peaceful in the glow of the bedside lamp. She looked so normal, like the woman I'd spent 10 years building a life with. Was I imagining things? Was my own paranoia twisting innocent moments into something sinister? Or had I become the fool who didn't see what was right in front of him? The question swirled in my mind, heavy and relentless. Finally, unable to resist the pull, I reached for her phone on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The screen lit up, but I was met with a lock screen, something Amelia had never bothered with before. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart pounding. It felt wrong, snooping through her phone like this. But wasn't it wrong for her to be hiding things from me? I wanted to know the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to cross that line. Not yet. I put the phone back and rolled onto my side, staring into the darkness. That whisper of doubt had turned into a roar, and no amount of self-reassurance could drown it out. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. By the following weekend, the tension between Amelia and me was palpable. I tried to act normal, but the questions I couldn't ask were written all over my face. Amelia, on the other hand, seemed to glide through the days as if nothing had changed. She was still laughing with the kids, sending out emails for her design business, and going to her yoga classes. But to me, it all felt rehearsed, like she was putting on a show for my benefit. Then came Saturday. Amelia told me she was meeting Claire, her best friend, for coffee. Claire and I had known each other for years. She was practically family, always coming to our barbecues and birthday parties. I felt a flicker of relief. At least this wasn't some vague work, outing, or mysterious yoga session. This was Claire. Safe, familiar Claire. She mentioned a new cafe downtown, Amelia said as she grabbed her bag. "I'll be back in a couple of hours." I kissed her on the cheek, the gesture automatic but hollow. "Say hi to Claire for me." "Will do," she said, flashing me a smile before heading out the door. The hours ticked by, and for once, my unease took a back seat to practicality. Amelia's birthday was coming up, and I figured Claire might have some ideas for a surprise gift. Around 3 p.m., I gave Claire a quick call. "Hey, Claire," I said when she picked up. "Got a minute? I wanted to pick your brain about something for Amelia's birthday." There was a pause on the other end of the line, just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Sure," Claire said finally. "But what's going on? Why would I know about her birthday plans?" I frowned. "Didn't you just see her? She said you two were meeting for coffee today." Claire's confusion deepened. "Ethan, I haven't seen Amelia in weeks. We've both been so busy. Why would she say that?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I muttered a quick goodbye and hung up, my mind reeling. Amelia hadn't seen Claire. She'd lied, boldly, confidently, and without a second thought. For a moment, I considered calling Amelia and demanding an explanation. But I stopped myself. If she'd lied once, what were the chances she'd tell me the truth now? No, I needed to be sure before I confronted her. I needed proof. That evening, when Amelia came home, I watched her closely. She was dressed casually, jeans, a sweater, nothing out of the ordinary. But her hair was freshly done, and she had that faint, musky scent again. She set her bag down on the counter, smiled at me, and asked, "How was your day?" I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of guilt. She looked so calm, so unbothered. It was infuriating. "Fine," I said, my voice tight. "How's Claire?" Her smile didn't falter. "She's good. We caught up on everything. She's thinking about taking that trip to Italy we talked about." I nodded slowly, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. The audacity of her lie was staggering. I wanted to call her out right then and there, to demand she explain herself. But instead, I forced a smile and said, "Sounds nice." She didn't seem to notice my tension. She kissed me on the cheek and went upstairs to check on the kids, leaving me standing in the kitchen, my mind spinning. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every look, every word, every gesture Amelia had made in the past few weeks replayed in my head like a broken record. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by asking. I had to dig deeper. Sunday morning dawned gray and cold, a stark contrast to the cheery chaos of Maddie and Liam racing through the house. Amelia seemed unfazed by the storm brewing inside me, chatting with the kids over breakfast like nothing was wrong. I watched her from across the table, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "Ethan," she said suddenly, breaking into my thoughts. "I was thinking we should go to the farmer's market today. The kids would love it, and I need to pick up some fresh flowers for a client's shoot tomorrow." She smiled at me, but all I could see was the lie she'd told about Claire. I forced a nod, swallowing the bitter words that clawed at my throat. "Sounds good," I said, keeping my voice even. The day passed in a blur of forced smiles and shallow conversations. Amelia played the part of the perfect wife effortlessly, her laughter ringing out as Maddie dragged her toward a stall selling handmade soaps. I followed behind, my mind miles away. By the time we got home, I felt like I was going to explode. Amelia went upstairs to put the kids down for a nap, and I seized the moment to act. I grabbed her laptop from the desk in our shared office and opened it. My hands trembled as I navigated to her email. Her inbox was a mix of work correspondence, store promotions, and messages from clients. At first glance, everything looked innocent. But then I saw it. An email from someone named Oliver. "Oliver, can't wait to see you again. Thursday was incredible. Amelia, me too. Same place next week." My stomach dropped. I stared at the words, hoping I'd misread them. But there was no mistaking the tone, the familiarity. This wasn't work-related. This wasn't innocent. I kept scrolling, finding more messages that confirmed my worst fears. Oliver wasn't a client. He was something much more intimate. They'd been meeting for weeks, dinners, late-night rendezvous, and if the hints in their messages were any indication, much more. I closed the laptop and sat back, my chest tight with a mix of rage and heartbreak. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built a life with, was living a double life. Amelia came downstairs not long after, her face soft with the contentment of a peaceful afternoon. She didn't notice the tension in my jaw or the way my hands gripped the armrest of the couch. "What do you want for dinner?" she asked casually, pulling open the fridge. I stared at her, the words on the tip of my tongue. Who the hell is Oliver? But I held back. I wasn't ready for this confrontation. Not yet. "Anything's fine," I said instead, my voice distant. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing. "You okay? You've been quiet today." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't press, turning back to the fridge. But I could feel the weight of her gaze lingering on me. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal burned in my chest, a heavy, unrelenting ache. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers, to make her explain how she could do this to me, to us. But I knew I needed more. More evidence. More understanding of what I was dealing with. If I confronted her now, she'd lie, twist the truth, turn the blame on me. No, I had to be smart. I had to wait. I reached for my phone and searched for private investigators in the area. It felt extreme, even invasive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Amelia wasn't just cheating. She was hiding something bigger. I sent an inquiry to a firm, my hands trembling as I hit send. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it. The private investigator, A no-nonsense woman named Rachel Hunt called me the next day. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, as she asked me for details. When did you start noticing changes in your wife's behavior? A few months ago, I replied. She's been distant, secretive. And then there's Oliver. Oliver, she repeated, her tone sharpening. How much do you know about him? Not much, I admitted. I've only seen his name in her emails. They've been meeting for weeks, but I don't know who he is or how they met. Rachel sighed. It's not uncommon. These things often start innocently enough until they don't. I'll take it from here. You'll hear from me soon. The wait was excruciating. Every moment Amelia spent smiling at the kids, texting on her phone, or leaving for her yoga class felt like a slap in the face. I kept telling myself that Rachel would find the answers I needed, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. 3 days later, Rachel called. Ethan, we need to meet, she said, her voice serious. I've got something you need to see. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. Rachel slid into the booth across from me, a manila folder in her hands. Her expression was unreadable. What did you find? I asked, my throat tight. She opened the folder and spread out a series of photos. My stomach churned as I looked at them. Amelia, sitting in an upscale restaurant, laughing across the table from a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident smirk that made me want to punch him through the photo. In another picture, they were holding hands, their faces close as they shared a private moment. She said she was meeting Claire. I muttered, my voice hollow. Rachel nodded. She wasn't. This man Oliver isn't just some random fling. He's her co-worker. That hit me like a brick. Co-worker? She's been working from home for months. How is that possible? She meets him during her so-called work outings, Rachel explained. Dinners, coffee, late nights. But there's something else you need to see. She handed me another photo, this one of Amelia and Oliver entering an office building downtown. What's this? I asked, frowning. That's where he works, Rachel said, and where they spend a lot of their time together after hours. There's no sign they've been using hotels, at least not yet. But the pattern is clear. They're together, and they're being careful to keep it under the radar. My fists clenched. Part of me wanted to confront Amelia that very second, to demand she explain herself. But the rational side of me knew it wasn't enough. I needed more. When I got home that evening, Amelia was sitting on the couch, her laptop open as Maddie and Liam built a pillow fort on the floor. She looked up at me, her smile warm and inviting, like nothing was wrong. How was work? She asked. Fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. How about you? Busy day? Yeah, lots of deadlines, she replied, closing her laptop. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and sadness. She was so convincing, so good at playing the role of the devoted wife and mother. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her. But now, I knew the truth. And it was only the beginning. That night, the weight of what I'd seen simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Amelia moved through the evening effortlessly, as if she didn't have a care in the world. She helped Maddie and Liam with their bedtime stories, laughed at their antics, and kissed their foreheads before turning off the lights. I stood in the doorway of the kids' room, watching her, my emotions a tangled mess of fury and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she stand there, pretending everything was fine, when she was lying to all of us? By the time she came back downstairs, I could barely contain myself. She found me in the kitchen, standing by the counter with a whiskey in my hand. You okay? She asked, tilting her head. Yeah, I said tightly. Just thinking. About what? I looked at her then, the words spilling out before I could stop them. About Oliver. Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. For a moment, I thought she'd deny everything, laugh it off, or feign ignorance. But then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Ethan, she said, her voice calm, almost condescending. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I snapped, slamming my glass down on the counter. I know about the dinners, the late nights, the office downtown. I know everything, Amelia. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. You've been spying on me? You lied to me. I shot back. You said you were meeting Claire. You said you were going to yoga, all while sneaking around with some guy from work. Amelia crossed her arms, her expression shifting to one of cool defiance. You don't understand. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me, I demanded, my voice rising. Explain how you've been seeing another man behind my back for weeks. She hesitated, her composure cracking just enough for me to see the guilt lurking beneath. But instead of apologizing or owning up to it, she deflected. "You've been so distant lately," she said, her tone sharp. "Always working late, always distracted. What did you expect me to do?" I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. "Are you seriously trying to blame this on me?" "I'm not blaming you," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm just saying, maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, we wouldn't be here." Her words hit me like a slap. Any hope I had that this was some kind of misunderstanding evaporated. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about betrayal on every level. "I've been here, Amelia," I said, my voice low and shaking. "I've been here every single day, working to provide for this family, trying to make you happy. And this is how you repay me." She didn't respond, her silence louder than any excuse she could have given. That night, I couldn't sleep. Amelia went to bed without another word, leaving me alone in the living room with my thoughts. The anger burned hot and fast, consuming everything else. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to confront her again, and make her understand the depth of what she'd done. But beneath the anger was something darker, something more painful. The slow realization that the life I thought we'd built together was a lie. The next morning, Amelia acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed the kids goodbye, grabbed her bag, and left for work. I sat at the kitchen table long after she'd gone, staring at the empty space where she'd been. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, resolve. If she thought she could walk all over me, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything without a fight. I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel. "I need more," I said when she answered. "Whatever it takes, find out everything." Rachel didn't waste any time. By the end of the week, she called me with new information. Her tone was sharper this time, her words more urgent. "Ethan, you're going to want to sit down for this," she said. I was already seated at my desk, staring at the half-finished code on my monitor. "What is it?" "It's about Oliver," she said. "He's not just any coworker. He's Amelia's boss." The words hit me like a hammer. "Her boss?" I repeated, my mind racing. "Yes," Rachel confirmed. "He's the head of the design firm she freelances for. And there's more. He's married." The air seemed to leave the room. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just some fling. Amelia wasn't only betraying me. She was entangling herself in something far messier, far riskier. "Does his wife know?" I asked, my voice tight. "Not yet," Rachel said. "But that's not the twist." My stomach tightened. "What is?" "They've been using company funds to cover their meetups, dinners, gifts, even some of their so-called work trips. If this comes to light, it could blow up his career and hers." That night, as I sat in the living room, staring at the neatly compiled report Rachel had emailed me, the full scope of Amelia's betrayal began to sink in. She wasn't just risking our marriage. She was risking everything. I replayed every moment of the last few months, every excuse, every late-night outing. How many times had I ignored the signs? How many times had I told myself that Amelia was too smart, too ethical, too good to do something like this? And yet here we were. Amelia came home late again that night. She didn't offer an excuse, and I didn't ask. Instead, I waited until the kids were asleep before confronting her. "Tell me about Oliver," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. "I already told you, Ethan. It's not what you think." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice rising. "I know he's your boss. I know he's married. And I know you've been using company funds to cover your tracks." Her face paled, the confident mask she'd worn for weeks slipping. "How do you?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I cut in. "What matters is that you've been lying to me, to him, to everyone." She sank into the nearest chair, her hands trembling as she ran them through her hair. "Ethan, I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Don't," I said, shaking my head. "Don't play the victim here. You made your choices." She looked up at me, her eyes glassy with tears. "You don't understand. I've been unhappy for so long. I didn't know how to tell you." "Unhappy?" I repeated, incredulous. "So, your solution was to cheat? To risk our marriage, our family, your career?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time, she looked truly defeated. I spent the night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling as her words echoed in my mind. "I've been unhappy for so long. Was that true?" Had I missed the signs? Or was this just her way of deflecting blame, of justifying something unjustifiable? Either way, it didn't change the facts. She had lied. She had betrayed me. And now, she was dragging us both into a mess I wasn't sure we could survive. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Amelia moving around in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, the smell of coffee and pancakes filling the air. It felt surreal, almost mocking, like she was trying to paper over the cracks with a perfectly cooked meal. I stayed in the guest room for as long as I could, pretending I wasn't awake yet. But eventually, Maddie knocked on the door, her little voice chirping, "Dad, come eat." Mom made pancakes. When I walked into the kitchen, Amelia was sitting at the table with the kids, smiling like nothing had happened. "Morning," she said, her tone light. "Morning," I muttered, sitting down and pouring myself a cup of coffee. The kids chatted away, oblivious to the tension between us. Amelia played along, laughing at their stories and asking about their plans for the day. But every time she looked at me, her smile faltered, just for a second. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or fear. Maybe both. After breakfast, Amelia pulled me aside while the kids were watching TV. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. "Then talk." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But instead, she said, "I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." Funny way of showing it, I snapped. "I'm serious," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I've made mistakes, but I still love you. I still want us to work." I laughed bitterly. "Work? How does this work, Amelia? You're in love with someone else. You're risking everything we've built for what? Excitement? A thrill?" "It's not about that," she said, shaking her head. "It's not about love or excitement or any of those things. I felt so lost, like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to reach you anymore." Her words stopped me in my tracks. For weeks, I'd been consumed by anger, by the betrayal. But now doubt crept in. Had I missed something? Had I been so focused on work, on providing for our family, that I'd neglected her? "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy?" "I didn't know how," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. And by the time I realized, it felt too late. That night, I lay awake again, her words echoing in my mind. She was still lying about the affair. That much was clear. But the cracks in her mask, the vulnerability in her voice, felt real. Was it possible that I'd failed her? That I'd let the distance between us grow without even realizing it? I hated that I was questioning myself, questioning everything. But doubt has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, twisting your perception until you don't know which way is up. The next day, I called Rachel again. "I need more," I said, pacing the backyard. "You already have enough," she replied. "The affair is confirmed." "What more do you need to know?" "I need to understand why," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I need to know if this was just some fling or if she's planning to leave me." Rachel sighed. "Ethan, I can dig deeper, but I need you to be prepared. The answers might not be what you want to hear." "They never are," I muttered. When Amelia came home that evening, she was quieter than usual. She didn't mention our earlier conversation, and neither did I. But as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the kids laughing and chattering between us, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the calm before the storm. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman I married was still in there somewhere. But the doubt wouldn't let me. The storm broke 2 days later when Rachel called me again. Her voice was urgent, laced with something I hadn't heard before, unease. "Ethan, I've found something," she said. "And it's big." I gripped the phone tighter. "What is it?" "Amelia isn't just having an affair with Oliver," Rachel said carefully. "She's been actively planning to leave you." The world tilted beneath me. "What?" "She's been working with a divorce attorney," Rachel continued. "They've been gathering evidence to paint you as neglectful, emotionally unavailable, inattentive to the kids. She's building a case to take the house, full custody of the children, and a significant portion of your assets." I staggered back, sinking into a chair. "That can't be true. She wouldn't do that." "She couldn't." "She can," Rachel said firmly. "And she is—" "Ethan, you need to act fast. If she files first with this narrative, it could get messy." My mind reeled. I thought I'd been fighting to save our marriage, to understand why she betrayed me. But this wasn't just about infidelity. Amelia wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to dismantle our entire life. That evening, I couldn't hide my anger any longer. Amelia came home late again, her face lighting up with a practiced smile that immediately grated on my nerves. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Out," she said breezily, hanging her coat. "Had a late meeting." "With Oliver?" The smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Ethan, we've already been over this. I told you, there's nothing going on." "Stop lying," I snapped, slamming my hand on the counter. "I know about the lawyer. I know you're building a case against me." Her face froze, her eyes wide. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Amelia," I said, my voice rising. "You're planning to take everything, the house, the kids, my money. Were you going to tell me? Or were you just waiting until it was all wrapped up in a neat little bow?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence was deafening. "Say something," I shouted, the rage boiling over. "I didn't want it to be like this," she said finally, her voice shaking. "I thought it would be easier if—" "Easier?" I cut her off. "Easier for who?" "You. While you ripped my life apart." Tears welled in her eyes, but they only fueled my anger. "You're not the victim here," I said coldly. "You've been lying to me for months, cheating on me, and now you're trying to paint me as the bad guy. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to our kids?" She flinched, her tears spilling over. "I never wanted to hurt them," she whispered. "Or you. Then why are you doing this?" She looked down, her shoulders shaking. "Because I don't know how to fix us? I don't know how to fix me. I thought this was the only way to start over." Her words cut through me like a knife. There it was, the truth. She wasn't just unhappy in our marriage. She was unhappy with herself, and she was willing to destroy everything we'd built to escape it. That night, I stayed in the guest room again, my thoughts racing. Amelia's tears haunted me, but so did her lies. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I loved become someone I barely recognized? I called Sarah Langston, a top-tier divorce attorney Rachel had recommended, the next morning. "I need to protect myself," I told her, my voice tight with emotion. "You've made the right decision," Sarah said. "We'll move quickly. The evidence you've gathered will work in your favor." "And Ethan?" "Yes. Do not let her know you've filed until it's done," she said firmly. "You need to stay one step ahead." That evening, Amelia acted as if nothing had happened, as if our confrontation the night before hadn't even occurred. She smiled at the kids, chatted about her day, and even asked if I wanted to watch a movie after dinner. I played along, nodding and smiling when necessary. But beneath the surface, I was boiling. She thought she still had control, that she could dictate how this ended. She was wrong. The next morning, Sarah's legal team began the process of drafting the divorce petition. As they gathered the evidence I'd provided, my emotions swung wildly between heartbreak and fury. Amelia's betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was calculated, strategic, and cold. She wasn't trying to save anything. She was trying to destroy me. I had to sit through meetings about custody laws, financial disclosures, and property division while keeping my face neutral. But every word felt like a fresh wound. How had my life come to this? Just weeks ago, I was worried about our lack of date nights. Now, I was fighting to keep my family from falling apart. That evening, I came home to find Amelia sitting at the dining table, her laptop open and a glass of wine in hand. She glanced up as I walked in, her expression softening into something almost apologetic. "Hey," she said tentatively. "Hey," I replied, my voice curt. "Can we talk?" she asked, closing her laptop. I hesitated, then sat across from her, my heart pounding. "Go ahead." She took a deep breath, swirling her wine. "I've been thinking about us, about everything. I know I've hurt you, Ethan. I know I've made mistakes. But I don't want this to end badly." I stared at her, my jaw tightening. "And badly? You've been planning to rip my life apart behind my back. I think we've already crossed into badly." She winced, her composure faltering. "That's not what I wanted," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know how else to handle this." "Handle what?" I demanded. "Your unhappiness? Your affair? Or your plan to take everything we've built and leave me with nothing?" Tears filled her eyes. "I was scared, okay? I didn't know how to tell you that I felt stuck, that I felt lost." "Lost?" I repeated, incredulous. "So, you decided to blow up our lives instead of talking to me? To your husband?" Her tears spilled over, but I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. And then Oliver. He made me feel alive again. I know that doesn't make it right, but it's the truth. The truth. I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. You wouldn't know the truth if it hit you in the face. You've lied to me, to our kids, to yourself. And for what? A fling with your boss? A chance to feel alive? At what cost, Amelia? She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. But it did, I said coldly. And now we're here. I left her at the table and went upstairs, my chest tight with anger and sadness. Her tears, her excuses, they didn't matter. Not anymore. I had given her so many chances to come clean, to save what we had. She had chosen lies every single time. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with thoughts of what the future would look like, of courtrooms and custody agreements, of dividing the life we'd built into pieces. But amidst the chaos in my mind, one thought stood out above the rest. I wasn't going to let her win. The next day, Sarah called to let me know the papers were ready. We can file tomorrow, she said. And once we do, Amelia will be served within the week. I nodded, gripping the phone tightly. Let's do it. As I hung up, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The betrayal still burned, but now I had a plan. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking control. That evening, Amelia came into the living room as I was flipping through a TV channel. Maddie and Liam already asleep upstairs. She sat down beside me, a tentative smile on her face. I was thinking we could take the kids to the park this weekend, she said. Maybe have a picnic. Just spend some time as a family. I turned to her, my expression unreadable. Sounds nice. She looked relieved, her smile growing. I want to make things better, Ethan. I really do. I nodded, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. We'll see. As she went upstairs, I sat alone in the quiet of the living room, the weight of her words sinking in. She thought she still had me, still had control of the narrative. But this time, I was the one holding the cards. A week later, Amelia was served at work. Sarah's advice to serve her in a professional setting was strategic. It would catch her off guard and limit any dramatic outbursts. That morning, I went through my usual routine. Breakfast with the kids, coffee at the kitchen table, while Amelia bustled around, seemingly unaware of what was coming. Have a good day, she said, kissing the kids on their foreheads before grabbing her bag and heading out. You too, I said, my tone neutral. The moment the door shut behind her, I felt a rush of mixed emotions. Relief, anxiety, and a strange sense of vindication. The wheels were officially in motion. By midday, Sarah called with an update. She was served, she said simply. We've filed, and the court date will be set soon. Be prepared. Things might get messy from here. Messy didn't even begin to describe it. That evening, Amelia stormed through the front door, her face flushed with anger. She dropped her bag on the floor and fixed me with a glare. You served me at work, she hissed. I did. I replied calmly. It seemed fitting, considering how much time you've spent there with Oliver. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. You couldn't have talked to me first? We could have handled this privately, Ethan. Privately? I snapped, standing to face her. Like how you were privately planning to destroy my life behind my back? She took a step back, her eyes narrowing. This isn't just on me, you know. You've been distant for years, buried in work, ignoring me. Stop deflecting. I cut her off. This isn't about me working long hours. This is about you lying, cheating, and plotting to take everything from me. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if she couldn't decide how to respond. Finally, she crossed her arms and said, Fine. If this is how you want to do it, then fine. She stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. For the next few days, the house felt like a war zone. Amelia avoided me as much as possible, throwing herself into her work and spending more time in her office than with the kids. But when she did speak to me, her tone was sharp, her words laced with bitterness. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said one night as we passed each other in the hallway. I stopped, turning to face her. Harder for who? You? Because this isn't just about you, Amelia. This is about what you've done to this family. She didn't respond, just shook her head and walked away. Then came the next bombshell. Sarah called me one afternoon with a new piece of evidence that Rachel had uncovered. Ethan, she said, her tone serious, We found something troubling. What is it? I asked, bracing myself. Amelia's been using joint funds to finance her relationship with Oliver. Thousands of dollars, dinners, gifts, even business trips that were clearly personal. The blood drained from my face. Are you serious? Yes, Sarah said. And this will work in your favor during the settlement. Judges don't look kindly on misuse of marital assets. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. Amelia wasn't just betraying me emotionally. She was betraying me financially, using our shared resources to fund her affair. That evening, I confronted her. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked, holding up a printed statement of the joint account transactions. Amelia froze, her face paling. What are you talking about? Dinner at the Sterling Club, I said, pointing to a charge. A trip to New York. Jewelry from Cartier. All of it paid for with our money. She opened her mouth to respond but quickly closed it again, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. You disgust me, I said, my voice trembling with rage. You used our money to fund your affair. Do you have any idea how selfish, how cruel that is? I didn't mean, she began, but I cut her off. Save it, I snapped. I don't want to hear another excuse. You've crossed every line, Amelia. Every single one. She stared at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But this time, I felt no sympathy. That night, I locked the bedroom door behind me, leaving Amelia to sleep in the guest room. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The betrayal still burned, but now it was laced with something else, determination. I wasn't going to let her take any more from me. The clarity I felt that night hardened into resolve the next morning. Amelia's betrayal had broken something inside me, but it had also sharpened my focus. She had crossed every conceivable line, and now I was determined to protect what mattered most. My kids and the life I'd built without her. Sarah and I met again later that week to finalize our strategy. She was sharp, confident, and methodical as she laid out the next steps. The financial misuse strengthens your case, she said. Combined with her affair and the evidence of her deception, you're in a strong position. But this next phase will test your patience. What do you mean? I asked. People like Amelia don't take losing well, Sarah said. She'll push back emotionally and legally. You need to be prepared for that. I nodded, clenching my fists. I'll be ready. Over the next few days, the house was filled with a strained silence. Amelia was still in the guest room, her attempts to engage with me minimal at best. When we did interact, it was tense and transactional, discussions about schedules for the kids, reminders about bills, nothing more. But despite the quiet, I could feel her anger simmering beneath the surface. One evening, as I was helping Maddie with her math homework, Amelia walked into the kitchen. Her expression was tight, her eyes hard. We need to talk, she said, her voice cold. Maddie looked up at her, then at me. Is everything okay, Dad? Everything's fine, sweetie, I said, giving her a reassuring smile. Why don't you head to the living room for a bit? Once Maddie was gone, I turned to Amelia. What is it? She crossed her arms, glaring at me. You've turned this into a war, Ethan. I hope you realize what you're doing to our family. You still here, incredulous. What I'm doing? Are you kidding me? You're the one who lied, cheated, and tried to take everything from me. I made mistakes, she snapped, her voice rising. But you didn't have to humiliate me by serving me at work. You didn't have to turn this into a public spectacle. You did that all on your own, I said, my voice calm but firm. You made your choices, Amelia. Now you're dealing with the consequences. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. She wasn't crying out of remorse. She was crying because she was losing. The confrontation seemed to light a fire in her. Over the next week, her bitterness boiled over. She made subtle jabs during conversations with the kids, thinly veiled criticisms aimed at painting me as the bad guy. She slammed doors, left messes for me to clean, and even accused me of being emotionally abusive during one particularly heated argument. I refused to rise to her bait. Every insult, every tantrum only strengthened my resolve. She thought she could rattle me, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. The kids, meanwhile, started picking up on the tension. Maddie asked me one night if I was mad at Mom, her big brown eyes filled with worry. Your mom and I are going through some things right now, I said gently, kneeling beside her bed. But no matter what happens, we both love you and Liam more than anything. That will never change. She nodded, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. It broke my heart, but I knew I had to stay strong for her and her brother. That weekend, I took Maddie and Liam to the park. As they played on the swings, laughing and chasing each other, I felt a flicker of peace. For the first time in weeks, the weight of everything lifted, even if only for a moment. Amelia wasn't there. She had claimed she needed to catch up on work, but I knew better. She couldn't face the reality of what was happening, so she avoided it. Watching my kids, I realized something important. No matter how messy this got, they were my anchor. They were the reason I couldn't give in to the anger or the sadness. They needed me to be their rock, their constant in the storm. As I drove home with them that afternoon, their laughter echoing in the back seat, I made a silent vow. I would fight for them, for their happiness, for their future. And I wouldn't let Amelia's betrayal define the rest of our lives. 2 days later, Rachel called again. Her voice carried an urgency that sent a chill down my spine. "Ethan, we've uncovered something else," she said. I gripped the phone tighter. "What now?" "It's Oliver," Rachel said, her tone measured. "He's been talking to his wife. She's discovered the affair." My stomach sank. "And she's furious, of course," Rachel continued. "But here's the kicker. Oliver has been distancing himself from Amelia. He's trying to save his marriage, and it seems like he's leaving her out to dry." The information hit me like a freight train. Amelia's grand escape plan was crumbling. The man she risked everything for was retreating, leaving her to face the fallout alone. "What does this mean for me?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "It strengthens your case," Rachel replied. "If Oliver cuts ties, Amelia will have no support system to back her claims. She'll be exposed as the instigator of this whole mess." For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. There was a grim satisfaction in knowing Amelia's betrayal was catching up with her. But there was also a deep sadness. This wasn't how I wanted things to end. Not for her, not for our kids. That evening, Amelia came home later than usual, her face drawn and pale. She barely said a word to me or the kids, retreating to the guest room without even eating dinner. Something had changed. The next day, I found out what. Amelia's lawyer called Sarah to request a meeting. Sarah briefed me on the conversation, her sharp eyes glinting with anticipation. "They're looking for a settlement," Sarah said. "It seems Amelia is no longer interested in a fight." "Why?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Oliver," Sarah replied. "He's left her hanging, and now she doesn't have the resources or the leverage to continue. They know they can't win." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the revelation settling over me. Amelia had lost her partner in crime, and now she was scrambling to salvage what she could. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I walked into the room, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Amelia was already there, sitting across the table with her lawyer. She looked tired, her usual confidence replaced by something quieter, almost resigned. "Thank you for coming," her lawyer began. "We'd like to propose terms for a settlement." Sarah and I listened as they outlined their requests. Amelia wanted joint custody of the kids, no spousal support, and a division of assets that heavily favored me. It was a far cry from her original demands. Sarah leaned forward, her expression neutral. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Her lawyer hesitated, but Amelia spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want this to be over." I studied her, searching her face for any sign of manipulation. But all I saw was a woman who had lost her fight, who had realized too late the cost of her decisions. After the meeting, Sarah and I discussed the terms. "It's a fair offer," she said. "You could push for more, but it's clear she's ready to move on." I nodded slowly. "Let's take it. I just want this done." That night, Amelia approached me in the kitchen. Her eyes were red, and her hands trembled as she gripped the counter. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. "For everything," she replied. "For lying, for cheating, for trying to take everything from you. I messed up, Ethan. I ruined us." Her words stirred something in me, a flicker of the love I used to feel for her, buried beneath the rubble of our marriage. But it wasn't enough to erase the damage. "I'm glad you finally see that," I said, "but it doesn't change what happened." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I hope someday you can forgive me." As she walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. The betrayal still hurt, but now, for the first time, I felt like I could begin to move on. The final settlement hearing was set for the following week. Walking into that courtroom was one of the most surreal moments of my life. The woman sitting across from me, pale and subdued, was a shadow of the Amelia I'd known for years. The confident, fiery woman who had once laughed at my bad jokes and planned family vacations now seemed drained, defeated. But I wasn't there to mourn what we'd lost. I was there to protect what still mattered: my kids, my future, and the truth. Sarah presented our case with precision, highlighting the affair, the financial misuse, and the lies that had unraveled our marriage. Amelia's lawyer offered little resistance, their tone conciliatory. They knew they had no real leverage. When the judge issued the final ruling, the weight of months of pain and uncertainty lifted from my shoulders. I was granted primary custody of Maddie and Liam. The house was awarded to me, and Amelia's request for any portion of my savings or assets was denied. The judge explicitly cited her actions as the reason for the ruling, making it clear where the blame lay. Amelia barely reacted. She nodded at her lawyer's whispered words, gathered her things, and left without looking back. When I returned home that evening, Maddie and Liam were waiting for me, their faces lighting up as I walked through the door. They didn't know the details of what had happened, and I planned to keep it that way. They didn't need to carry the burden of their parents' mistakes. "Did everything go okay, Dad?" Maddie asked, her voice small. I knelt down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." She smiled and hugged me tightly, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. A week after the hearing, Amelia came by to pick up the kids for her first visitation weekend. She looked nervous as she stood on the porch, her hands fidgeting at her sides. "Hi," she said awkwardly. "Hi," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The kids ran to her, their excitement cutting through the tension. Amelia knelt to hug them, her face softening in a way that reminded me of the woman I used to love. Before they left, she turned to me, her voice tentative. "Thank you for letting me see them. I know I don't deserve your kindness." "I'm not doing this for you," I said simply. "I'm doing it for them." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I hope we can find a way to be civil. For their sake." "We'll see," I replied, closing the door behind her. That night, I sat in the quiet house, reflecting on everything that had happened. Amelia's betrayal had shattered the life we'd built together, but it had also forced me to confront the truth about our relationship and myself. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't the villain she tried to paint me as either. I had survived the storm, and now I was ready to rebuild. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. The house felt different without Amelia, quieter, emptier in some ways, but it was also lighter. The tension that had hung in the air for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Maddie and Liam adapted quicker than I expected. Kids are resilient like that. They ask questions occasionally about why Mom didn't live with us anymore or why I looked sad sometimes, but I did my best to shield them from the harsher truths. They didn't need to know everything. My focus shifted to rebuilding, not just for them, but for myself. Therapy helped, giving me the tools to unpack the pain and anger I'd been carrying. I learned to forgive myself for missing the signs, for not being the perfect husband or father. And eventually, I began to forgive Amelia, not because she deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry the weight of her actions any longer. One afternoon, I ran into Oliver's wife, Hannah, at the park. She was sitting on a bench, watching her two boys play in the sandbox. I recognized her from the photos Rachel had shown me during the investigation. "You're Ethan, right?" she asked as I approached, her voice calm but sharp. I nodded. "And you're Hannah." She smiled faintly, gesturing for me to sit. Funny, isn't it? Two strangers brought together by betrayal. I hesitated, then sat beside her. "How are you holding up?" "Better," she said with a shrug. "Oliver's groveling, trying to save our marriage. I'm not sure if I'll let him, though." "What about you?" "It's been a journey," I admitted, "but I'm getting there. The kids help." She nodded, her eyes softening. "They always do. Kids remind us what really matters." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the children laugh and play. There was no bitterness between us, no anger, just the quiet understanding of two people who had weathered the same storm. As the months turned into a year, I started to feel like myself again. I focused on my career, my hobbies, and most importantly, my kids. They were my anchor, my reason for pushing forward even when things felt overwhelming. Amelia was still part of their lives, though her visits were infrequent and sometimes strained. She seemed to be struggling, but I didn't pry. Her choices had led her to this point, and it wasn't my responsibility to fix her anymore. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, Maddie joined me, curling up on the bench beside me. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, her big brown eyes searching mine. I smiled and put an arm around her. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm okay." "Do you miss Mom?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a moment. "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but I think we're all where we're supposed to be now." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. "I like it when it's just us." Her words filled me with a quiet sense of pride. Despite everything, Maddie and Liam were thriving. And so was I. Looking back, I realized that Amelia's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. It taught me the importance of self-respect, of setting boundaries, and of fighting for what really mattered. If anyone reading this has been through something similar, my advice is this: it's okay to hurt. It's okay to feel broken. But don't let someone else's choices define you. Feel the pain, then let it go. You're stronger than you realize. And there's a life waiting for you on the other side of heartbreak. This isn't the life I envisioned, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm proud of it. Thank you for listening to my story.